And guess what?
We're
We're
live.
live. It is Saturday, June 13th, 2020, 5 o'clock p.m. It is the 79th day in a row that Kate and I have done in lieu of fun. And let's think about that for a moment. That means 79 days when I have not been to the Brookings Institution, 79 days where Kate has not been to St. John's Law School, been on a plane, or traveled at her usual breakneck speed to give speeches and go to conferences. 79 days since I have been to the NBC studio, which is only a few blocks from my house. 79 days since you all have had something better to do than to watch in lieu of fun. Um, and I just want to say that means we are way closer to 90 days, which is 3 months, than we are to 2 months. The days are piling up. When we started this, we never talked about how long we were going to do it. We were figuring lockdown would be a couple of weeks, maybe a month. We never really talked about how long it was going to go on. But every day on 5 o'clock, we are here with a drink, in this case, a Manhattan, about which I feel a little bit ambivalent.
Really?
Yeah, I kind of prefer the bourbon just straight up, but we are here. It is not weirdly getting old. We're not running out of guests. People now come to us and say, "Hey, I want to be on In Lieu of Fun," and
Yeah, that's weird.
so yeah, it's kind of weird, right? But it's like happened more than once, and so that brings us to the fact that it is a gorgeous, cool day in Washington. How is it in Cape Cod?
It's the same. It's like 60, 65 and sunny and beautiful. I spent it all in a car, but that's fine.
And
We'll get into that later.
when we're going to have to hear that story. But, the thing that you got to understand is that when the weather is beautiful, that is God taunting you. That is God saying, I want you to go outside and socialize and, make out with a friend under a tree, spread the virus. And it is your job to say, this beautiful, shiny bauble before me is not reality. The reality is we are still not allowed to have fun anymore because we are still in this quarantine limbo thing. And you might think that it's like okay to go out now because it's gorgeous and it's beckoning you, but that is the siren song that will lead you to
I think that it's
flattening
Odysseus that like hits a
flattening
bunch
of
of
the curve
rocks.
in the wrong direction. So when
Oh,
we said flatten the curve, we meant flatten it on the way up. But if you look now at the curve, it was not flattened on the way up. It went up really sharply. It crested and then it came down, and now it has settled into a gentle plateau. And the problem with the plateau is that the plateau is what they call in geology a high plateau. It is 20,000 new cases a day in the United States. And so, yeah, we're not going up anymore. We've flattened the curve. But the trouble is we flattened it on the way down, which was not what the flatten the curve slogan or hashtag was all about. The flatten the curve hashtag was about flattening it on the way up. So now we have, and I don't want to draw an equivalence between these because they're not equivalent at all. We have all these mass gatherings to flatten the curve on the way down. We've got the protests, which, I have a lot of sympathy for the protests. I'm with them, on a lot of stuff, but it is a means, it is a really good vector for the virus. The president has scheduled a rally an indoor rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He seems to have moved the date, so it's not on Juneteenth anymore. But the virus doesn't care if it's symbolically offensive or not. It just sees opportunity. By the way, Oklahoma is one of the states where the virus is not plateaued. It is still going up. And so I just want to say the beautiful day out there is a mirage. It's a mirage to the person crawling around along the desert, sees that beautiful drinking water with the palm trees and the oasis before him as his skin, crackles on his face. It's not real. The beautiful day is just the siren song that is leading you into the coronavirus's claws. Not that viruses have claws, but hey, this is an impromptu monologue. Resist it. Wear a mask. Stay at home. If you want to go out for a walk, fine, go out for a walk. Stay by yourself. Stay with the people. Nothing has changed. We're in a high plateau of lots of people getting sick and dying. And we are not allowed to have fun anymore. And we don't even have a guest today. In lieu of fun, it is just Kate and me and this Manhattan about which I say I have mixed feelings. What are you drinking, Kate? You look like you're drinking coffee.
It is tea. I'm
going to switch over. The spirit of In Lieu of Fun.
Yeah. No, I was going to, but I didn't have time to grab anything and I had this already. I did get these. I have 3 points of order today. One is to tell the story of the thing that I found in the parking lot that I already texted you about, which I thought was hilarious.
Excellent.
The second is to tell the story of why I spent 5 hours in a car. And then
I have a feeling this has to do with dog health.
Yes, it does. That does. And then the third thing is to say, well, I guess I'll start with this. I guess I can just talk about it now because the person, someone got fired. I'm not going to say whether, I don't really know, but we had a In Lieu of Fun episode after I published the leaked executive order on social media censorship. And I knew and I heard from some of my sources that there was a hunt going on for the person who leaked the information, and someone has now been fired. So
someone from the White House?
Yeah.
Wow.
The Washington Examiner is reporting it. So I haven't heard a name. I don't know what's going on. I'm not going to say anything, but that's kind of crazy to me. Yeah. Anyways, people were very angry that I published that, is what I heard from inside the administration, was that angry that the leak happened. And then
that's kind of weird because it's not like anything happens in the White House without a leak.
That's kind of what I thought too. And the other thing was
what's the last
so many people got it. I thought that there was I thought that there must have been this is not a statement on who sent it to me or whatever, but it seemed like so many people I knew had it that there had to be that it was purposeful that they leaked it. They wanted it leaked almost. So this is super interesting to me and weird. And I also just want to say that pen, all of the ink, all of the terrible executive order that came, I got the pen from it that he signed with, the Sharpie. Yeah. Because we sign executive orders with Sharpies now. Good old, I don't know if it's made in America, probably should be, but all of the gold, as if to be the perfect metaphor, all of the gold ink is flaking off of it, and it doesn't. It's almost it's falling apart. And his signature, you can I'll hold it up here. You can't even see his signature anymore because all of that, it just is rubbed off, which is fine with me. But it's just yeah. Anyway, I think that that's funny.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I know. I'm like gonna like stop right now using it because I almost feel like this tainted pen with like the half rubbed off gold ink is like too perfect, like a metaphor for a lot. Like
The decay of society
the
in
decay
general.
of society, exactly.
The fact that the president signs executive orders with a Sharpie that the ink of which cannot like stay on it, it flakes off, is like,
The
I don't
gold
know.
ink,
It's
the gold
yeah, the
ink, the
gold
gold.
ink, the guilt, and reveals the rot underneath. So we had a request yesterday to talk about um, uh, the Flynn oral argument,
Oh yeah,
which
I
I
refreshed
wrote,
myself on.
which I wrote a lengthy summary of on Lawfare, which I will not regurgitate. But for those of you who want a brief oral account of it, the oral argument was it's very hard to talk about this without getting technical. So I'm going to try to do that, and the oral argument was at the DC Circuit Court of Appeals on the question of whether to preemptively order the district judge to comply with the Justice Department's request to dismiss the case against Flynn.
Very high standard.
Yes, the technical request is for what's called a writ of mandamus, which is to say a writ that orders somebody to do something. And the judge is holding a hearing on Tuesday, I believe, maybe the 16th, whether that's Monday or Tuesday. I think it's Tuesday, to consider this motion. And the Flynn's lawyer, who is a kind of Fox News talking head type named Sidney Powell, went up to the DC Circuit, and the Justice Department supported her. And so yesterday they had an argument about this, and the respondent is the judge himself. So the judge had to get a lawyer. So the judge got a Washington super lawyer named Beth Wilkinson. And so it ended up being a pretty interesting oral argument where you had, on the one hand, not to put too fine a point on it, but a Fox News talking head arguing alongside the Deputy Solicitor General, Jeff Wall, who is a terrific oral advocate. And then alongside Beth Wilkinson, who is also a terrific advocate. And so you saw sort of the range of quality of advocacy, and all before a panel that was pretty, reflects quite a bit of the ideological diversity of the DC Circuit. So on the left side was Judge Robert Wilkins, who's a Obama appointee, liberal judge. You had, and then two quite conservative judges, Karen McCraft Henderson, and a new judge appointed by Donald Trump, who's a woman named Naomi Rao, who is vying for the sort of firebrand executive power conservative slot on the DC Circuit. And so it was quite an argument. For those of you who are holding your breath for the outcome, I think they will probably rule quickly because Judge Sullivan's hearing is scheduled for Tuesday or whenever it is. So if they're going to have much impact, they've got to kind of act quickly. My guess, best I can tell, they're not going to reach the merits of the thing. They're likely, two of them anyway, Henderson and Wilkins, may just say it's too soon to be at the DC Circuit. Mandamus is not the appropriate remedy here, and they should wait for Judge Sullivan to rule. And then if they don't like his ruling, they can appeal it. So that's my guess as to where this is going. But my longer thoughts on it, including a pretty detailed summary of the argument itself, are on Lawfare, and the audio of the hearing itself is also on Lawfare, and is actually worth, if you've got a couple of hours of like housework to do, It's a really fine pair of pieces of oral advocacy plus an entertaining clown show from Sidney Powell. So it's like actually worth your time to listen to it if you have any inclination to listen to oral arguments. So those are my thoughts on the oral arguments. And if you guys have questions about them more specifically, I'm happy to go into it in more detail. So, Kate, what about this trip in the car? How's the dog?
Oh, yeah. I'll get to that in a second, but I was just going to say really quickly that I agree with what you said. The thing to really know is that a circuit court, any circuit court of appeals is not, well, this is always a very thorny definition of between finders of fact and finders of law. But the Court of Appeals is in theory it is not just in theory. It is not, its job is not to suss out facts. That is the job of the district court. And so to do what they're trying to do in this oral argument, which is to preempt this entire motion, which is before the facts have been found, before things have been figured out, it's just an extraordinary high standard for a number of levels, but at a very basic level, it's also what you would maybe consider a decision of equity, in which or an injunction or something like that, which is basically it puts a stop to everything at its core, and you won't have the chance to ever find out the facts, for example, if they rule in this way. So I just kind of think that the burden for Sidney Pollack was insanely high, almost non-breachable in any kind of situation. But as you said, I think that it is an incredible set of skilled advocates going head to head. And it's also just this is a fascinating moment. You just don't see this very often, I've never heard of it happening. But that's just might be because this isn't my bailiwick, but I've never heard of a judge having to get an attorney to represent them in proceedings to go against. There's so many layers of this, appointing Judge Gleason on to represent this. I read his brief, which was excellent, and was a piece of advocacy, which it should be.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it's a piece of advocacy, which it should be. But also some of his where he came down in saying well, what we should do given in light of this is maybe not to prosecute on this, but to prosecute on this, but consider the perjury ramifications in sentencing, but not to draw up a new charge of perjury or whatever else. We're kind of I thought even keeled, more so to speak. But it was funny because John and I were in the car for 5 hours and we got into this huge debate about it and about the Ken White episode that we had about this, in which Ken White and I were no, the charge of, we don't believe that we don't, I don't want to speak for Ken, but you don't believe that the law should be, an unjust law should be applied, but you don't believe that an unjust law should not be applied and in not being applied just be pretext for a political decision. I don't know. So that's kind of why I think that's where Ken and I came down. That was a little bit different from you.
Well, I think the big difference between, you're differently situated in this, but the big gap between Ken and me on this is that Ken is steeped in the way the Justice Department and the FBI engage with the average criminal defendant and is upset by that. And so sees parallels here and says, okay, this is pretty normal, but normal sucks. And I think there's actually a decent argument for that. What I'm steeped in is the case of Michael Flynn and the Russia investigation. And my belief is that they actually cut Flynn a lot of slack and he just spat in their faces. And I I think where Ken and I part company is he's thinking about Flynn in relation to his clients, and I'm thinking about Flynn in relation to past national security advisors.
Yes.
And it's, it's incomprehensible to me, like, that any of the last 10 national security advisors, the last one who could have behaved this way maybe was John Poindexter or Bud McFarlane, both of whom were, by the way, indicted, right, in the Iran-Contra affair. But, you've had a string of people that it would have been incomprehensible for them to behave this way. And that is the set of reference points that I'm responding to. And so, look, I mean, Ken is a criminal defense lawyer, and I'm a, kind of national security legal writer. And so we're responding to different aspects of it. I think what's interesting about Ken and my reaction is how similar it is, which is, okay, we come to it from different perspectives, different orientations, but we both say, hey, what was done to Flynn is not abnormal, right? And
yes,
if you want to, if you want to get upset about the system, that's a different conversation. But what happened to Flynn is a perfectly normal event in the criminal justice system as we've come to understand it. And I think Gleason's brief reflects that, right?
100%.
There's nothing unusual here. What's unusual is the government reversing course.
No, that is completely correct. And that's basically was like what I was coming down on. And in that, I thought that our conversation with Ken about this was actually a very interesting line drawing episode, because like, it's funny how I thought it was just fascinating how we kind of got to slightly different outcomes by applying like very similar, but like just tweaked principles, if that makes sense. And so it was like, and it was a very reasonable minds moment. So, but we have a question from Ian Kidger.
We have a very interesting question from Ian Kidger. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. The floor is yours, sir.
Hi. Question is there any practical way that Steve Mnuchin can be forced to reveal which corporations have received stimulus money before the election?
So this is a really interesting question. And just to give you a little bit of background on it, not Ian, because Ian clearly has the background. But for those of you who don't know, Mnuchin today refused, this past week, refused to disclose how the Treasury Department had spent, I believe, $500 billion, like literally $500 billion in stimulus funds with respect to these small business or medium-sized business loans that he's entitled to dole out under the stimulus package. And he cited a set of considerations like that they were proprietary or information that really does not sound in any, at least that I can discern, known principle of federal law. So my gut, Ian, is that a properly crafted Freedom of Information Act request that was litigated very promptly, and I mean, it would have to be within, so normally you have 20 days, they have 20 days to respond, and you can file suit after 20 days. I think it would be very hard for them to resist, and you might be able to file some kind of emergency motion for disclosure of it. It'd be tricky. The case law on it is complicated, but I don't think they have a basis to withhold this information. And this is literally information about who the federal government, what businesses the federal government is giving money to. And so my gut is, and I
also
have
because
not done
they were supposed to be giving them to small businesses, right? And from what I've
heard,
a lot of it has been big banks.
The concern about this slush fund has always been that it was going to be used as a kind of administration slush fund. And so yes, it was supposed to be an emergency fund for the Secretary of the Treasury to be able to kind of give out money that in a kind of nimble fashion. And I think there's something, in a normal world, there's something to be said for that kind of agility. But the concern in the Trump administration was always that it was going to go to kind of friends of the president, friends of Steve Mnuchin, that it was going to be kind of corruptly dealt out. And now they are not distributing it in a fashion that is transparent. And so I think there's a reasonable I cannot see the argument for withholding it. And they obviously haven't spelled out exactly what the basis for that would be, but I think they're probably likely to face a FOIA suit very promptly. It will not be from me, although I have filed similar cases in the past, because it doesn't involve national security matters and law enforcement, which is kind of my jurisdictional ambit. But I do think somebody is likely to file it, and I think it would be very hard to resist, actually. So I would not be surprised if you won't see the litigation this week, because you've got to file the request and then wait 20 days. But I think you're going to see it relatively quickly. And I think it'll be very difficult for the Treasury Department to resist it, because I just can't see it fitting into any of the relevant FOIA exemptions.
I completely agree with that. I think that I also happen to know that there's already people that are like, this is like 100% the beat that they're on for, this is like they're on track. This. I mean, like, you're just gonna if this is what you cover, like, you're just like, you as a journalist are just gonna like be filing FOIA right now, like, about
that's right.
Stuff.
If you're the New York Times reporters, or we should have asked Kathy about this yesterday, actually. If you're a Washington Post economics writer, this is low-hanging fruit, and you have an organization that's prepared to litigate it. I would be surprised if we didn't see litigation over this if this is not disclosed promptly. Kate, should we plan the show?
Yeah. Well, what are you thinking? I have a few people in mind that have reached out.
Who do you have in mind?
I wanted to finally get Jonathan Zittrain on. Like, for some reason we haven't had him, and he's great. So
yeah, he is great.
I was thinking him. And
let's do that.
Okay, great. And I gave him. Well, I'm glad you said that, because I already asked him. And then I kind of was like, well, I know like, it's not really like.
I'm very fond of Jonathan.
Yeah. So, but he's getting back to me on what day works for him. But then Marty Lederman wanted to finally come on, which is great.
So we should have a big Flynn conversation with a Flynn-formation-filled conversation with Marty Lederman, who has written a lot about the Michael Flynn case.
Yeah, maybe we should we should have Ken come on while Marty's on.
Yeah, so I wonder if we should do the Marty Flynn conversation with Ken, if he can do it, the day of the Sullivan hearing, the 16th. Because that would be.
Look at my calendar really quickly and figure out what day that is.
I think it's Tuesday, but I'm not sure.
You're right. It's a Tuesday. Sorry, I'm doing my thing with the paper, because sometimes paper is just nicer for calendaring and keeping track of dates.
But there are a couple other people who know the Flynn case super well. One of whom is Quinta Jurecic.
Yeah.
And, just at a granular, watching every shred of paper that's filed on that docket.
No, she's insane. She's like amazing about this.
Quinta really knows the case.
Yeah.
So we could have a Flynn day.
Yeah, and we could do a longer show because the thing about having that many people on, as I have discovered hosting a show, is that like all of a sudden not enough really smart people have time to be really smart. So,
right.
in my opinion. So,
No, I agree. And one of the things about like we usually go about an hour, but I mean, depending on how I think we'd want to be flexible on that because if like Judge Sullivan could go in any of 5 directions and you'd want to keep the possibilities open in that regard.
that sounds great. So like Tuesday, let's plan for a slightly longer show and a bunch of people, and we'll reach out to Popat and Marty and see if he can do it then. And Steve, he wanted to be on with Steve Vladek, so we can do that. That's great.
Although Vladek is not like focused on the Flynn stuff. I think Vladek is maybe a different
having
project,
them together
actually.
on would be, I had a feeling that like the Steve Vladek thing was slightly like that Steve wanted to be on the show and that Marty was like,
I love Steve.
I have no idea.
I think he's Steve is a good friend and I'd love to have him on, but Flynn is not the right subject for him.
Okay, great. So that sounds
he's polymathic,
great.
But I don't think he's focused particularly on Michael Flynn.
Who there was someone else. God. We really wanted to have on Kathleen Bellew.
Right.
Bellew,
I really want to have her.
She's amazing. But she didn't respond over Twitter, probably because she has really high notification settings. But I can easily get her information and like
let's reach out to her because she's yeah.
Okay.
Why not?
Okay. Perfect.
We had a very male week last week, so let's.
I know we're trending male. I'd like to kind of trend it in the opposite, but I agree. Yeah. What else? And having Quinta on, and then is there? I don't know. I would love to have Danielle back on, but I also kind of feel like we could wait for some moment that there is like more breaking news and that like, which is surely bound to happen in the next couple of weeks.
We've also had repeated requests for Susan Hennessy, who
yes.
I've been loath to bother because she has 2 small children at home.
I didn't know that. She has 2 kids. She's so young looking.
She has 2 children, one of whom I am a godparent of. The younger one, Jane. But I think we should invite Susan on. Who else?
There was someone else that I was talking to. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I mean, I know we need to have Ada back on.
We do need to have Ada back on because we have not discussed the Renaissance enough in Lieu of Fun.
She could also be interesting about the reopening of Italy. That's kind of.
I want to have Jung Pak on the show. Jung she is a Brookings colleague, a former CIA North Korea analyst. And she just wrote a book about a sort of biography of Kim Jong-un. And I've been reading it and I think it's great. It's really informative and just careful about what you can and can't say about Kim Jong-un. And Jung Pak is also like really smart and interesting and fun to talk to. And I think
that would be fascinating. I would love that. I love talking about North Korea. I have like this, we've talked about this. I have like this weird obsession with North Korea.
Yeah. So I'll write to Jung. She's promoting a book, so I can't imagine she wouldn't want to talk about it. But I really think it's a really impressive piece of work. I mean, it's as they say in the CIA, North Korea is the hardest of hard targets. And so figuring out what you can and can't say about it is a really interesting it's a really interesting project.
Stephen Levy has said that he wants to be on. He just wrote the Facebook book, and his book tour got cut short by the pandemic. But it would be kind of fun to have him on. He is this. I don't know if you've ever heard the story. Have you ever heard the story of the person who found Einstein's brain? Have you ever heard this story?
There has been like Radio Lab did a whole show about Einstein's brain, and this, it
was about Stephen and his reporting.
It was amazing.
Wasn't that the best episode? I loved that episode, and I didn't connect it, and I was like friends with Stephen, and then I was like re-listening to the episode, and I was like, oh my God. Oh, it's Stephen. Oh, it's that Stephen. Oh, it's that person. It was like so funny because now he wrote in the Googleplex, and he wrote like Facebook, the Inside Story. Now he has been a tech writer for a long time, but he's been just like in the scene doing interesting stuff for a long time. But the
Einstein's brain story. It's an amazing story, and I don't know him at all, but if you want to reach out and.
Oh yeah, no, I'm friends with him. No, that would be fun. Okay.
Hey, so what do you know about Judd Apatow?
Wait, like who's that? The
filmmaker?
Doesn't he make kind of bro-y films?
I don't know.
I don't really know that much about him.
All right, then we shouldn't have him on the show. Yeah.
Is he like follow you on Twitter?
Yeah. So I always check.
Well, he's kind of a big deal.
The people who follow me on Twitter who have like millions and millions of followers, I'm always like, I should probably know who they are, but sometimes I don't.
I think that he is a big deal, Ben. I think that we should both know who he is. And
but if anybody in the audience knows who Judd Apatow is, you want to like leave it in the Q&A.
Did he do like Wedding Crashers? And I feel like he did like those kind of like fratty movies, but also is
I'd tell you if I knew.
I had this really great debate, by the way, speaking of people who've been on the show a few times, but we should have back is Scott
Kevin Donahue says he's an interesting guy. Bring him on, watch his Netflix stand-up comedy special. All right, that's actually a good suggestion. I will watch his Netflix comedy special, and if he makes me laugh 5 times, it's got to be 5.
Okay.
We will bring him on the show. Or if he makes Kate laugh 5 times. If you're a comedy guy on Netflix comedy special,
times, you have to kick it to me and then I'll watch it.
Okay. And then we'll see. But if he doesn't make one of us laugh 5 times, he's not coming on the show. Because Whit Stillman, I've watched Metropolitan probably 10 times. And,
I still haven't watched it. That's because your wife forced me to rewatch Hunt for Red October 3 times last night.
Yeah.
I watched it 3 times.
Metropolitan makes me cry every time I watch it.
Okay, I'll watch it.
And it's like
cry right now, Ben.
No, I'm not gonna cry in front of you, Kate. That would be demeaning to my, my toxic masculinity. But the point is, to get a filmmaker on this show, it's got to be somebody who moves us. So if you're a comedian and you don't make one of Kate or me laugh 5 times in a whole comedy special, you're not coming on the show.
There are people that we've had in the show that I wish they'd had a comedy special I could hold them to in this regard, but those people will go unnamed. Ben.
Yes.
So that's a great.
I want to hear what happened to Nina.
Oh, ugh. It's like, Jesus, if it's not one thing, it's another. She's fine. She is actually totally fine. She just, yesterday, she was lying in her bed. She's this blonde little dog. And she just had I was come on over to pet her, and her entire rear end was just covered in blood. And she had this anal gland abscess cyst that had ruptured, and it was really gross and unpleasant and fine. And you're kind of a dog mom, so you do all of that. And then she was totally fine today, But the internet was very, very firm on like, if this happens, you need to go to a vet. And so we were like, okay, all of the vets in the Outer Cape have closed. Lack of like, they've gone out of business. It's really kind of sad. So we drove an hour to the nearest vet. And when we got to the vet, it was an emergency vet. And there were a lot of emergencies that were ahead of us, and we were not an emergency. And so we just sat in a car in a parking lot for 5 hours, basically, like waiting to get treatment for her, it was just like, you know, it was fine. It was totally fine. But like, it was just kind of like, it was not like any of the other things that have happened to her where I'm like, oh my God, like maybe she's really sick. I felt very lucky to just be like, oh, our dog is in a good place and she's fine. And like all of these poor people that are like sweating it out about whether their dog is going to be okay. But yeah, no, that was weird. But before we went, this was the crazy thing. Before we went and drove all of this way, we stopped and got coffee and pastries at this one little place, and you put on your mask and you get in the car, and the place was swarmed, and it's never ever in my entire life been this way. It was just like, I've been living by this little coffee shop for like the last, for like 30 years. And it was completely swarmed, people having breakfast on like multiple, like 6-foot spaced picnic benches. It was like, are you seeing this? Is this happening in DC? Like, there's just like all of these restaurants that are creating outdoor spaces in what used to be parking lots and things like that.
It's definitely happening in DC. There's I wouldn't say it's every restaurant, but it's a bunch, and they're creating, ostensibly socially distant spaces, and a lot of people are using them.
Yeah. And so it's great, but like, I mean, a little bit less mask use than I would have loved, but like, whatever. And I go in and we get coffee. I grab a bunch of scones and then I walk out. And as I'm walking out, I am just like, I kind of am like looking, carrying my stuff and looking down. And there's this bag like in the middle of the parking lot. And the bag is like, I'm like, is that a bag of weed? And I do not smoke weed. I do not like really have it. I mean, mostly I know what this looks like from like watching friends do it or doing whatever. And in fact, it is a giant bag of weed that is just sitting in this parking lot. And so I was like, what? Okay. Like, there's just like a giant bag of weed in this parking lot. What do you do? Like, it's legal in Massachusetts. It's totally fine. You can have up to an ounce, apparently.
Not under federal law, you can't.
Nope. You cannot. And so I was like, well, that's an interesting thing. And I was like, and then I was also kind of like, and any police officer can arrest you for having under federal law, even if they're local police. They can, maybe they won't, but like they can arrest you for having it. So I was like, okay. But it was it just was kind of one of these kind of strange moments of like, what do you do with something like that? And also, it is so bizarre to me. This is like kind of one of the areas of federalism that is like always perplexed me, which is just like, I don't understand in the kind of conceit that like Larry Lessig was talking about. I don't understand why we're okay with the fact that like we allow states to do this and we hope that the federal government doesn't prosecute or doesn't enforce. Like, that seems like a very strange. Doesn't that seem strange to you? Like, doesn't that seem like not like that? Just seems
it is
bizarre.
I think
norm-based.
I think it's one of the most interesting mechanisms of social and legal change we have in the United States, right? Where one of the federal government or the states gets way out in front of the other, and you have a political process by which you figure out who's the outlier, right? is the outlier here the federal government for continuing to contend that marijuana is a problem that needs criminal enforcement, or is the outlier the states that are that are not enforcing the norm that the federal government believes we have? And I think in this case, I don't have any doubt of where the long term is going. But sometimes what you end up with is a stable equilibrium of
federal non-enforcement and state new state
or,
action
or state state or one or two states being outliers, like Nevada having legal prostitution, and other states and the federal government still has the Mann Act, right? Although it doesn't call it that anymore. And states, I don't think any other state has legalized brothels, but you have these long-term equilibriums of things that are illegal in every jurisdiction except one. Sometimes, as with, for example, same-sex marriage, the outlying states pull the rest of the country along with them with a substantial assist from the courts. And sometimes the outlying states get reined in, which is, I think, what the federal government is still trying to do in the marijuana department, although not very effectively, and I don't think they will prevail in that regard. So I think it's actually kind of one of the coolest aspects of federalism that you have these tensions, and you have genuinely different, sometimes radically different policies depending on what states you live in.
I love that that was really well stated. And I think that's right. I mostly think you're right, though. It's funny that you bring up Nevada, because I mostly think of it in the latter term that you're talking about, which is that states end up being like roping in and kind of like being the mechanism for change, is the kind of the states as laboratory kind of conceit. But that's what I do think is interesting is like how this, not to bring it back to Flynn, but I am going to kind of bring it back to Flynn, which is that like you have all of these types of laws in which you enforce them in various ways against X person or Y person. And this is actually what I just don't like about federal prosecution generally, is like that, like, and I guess I'm mostly thinking, when I think about this, I'm thinking about the case that I worked on when I was in the EDNY. There was about this 19-year-old kid who had lied to federal prosecutors, who had he was kind of doing things that might have like indicated that he was going to do terrorist activity or be involved in terrorists. And they never, ever, ever were able to link him onto this. Oh, yay. Hi, Godwin.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
I didn't mean to interrupt you by bringing in Mike, but he had a question, so I was just queuing him up.
And I was like, oh, it's Mike. But I was just going to say that like, this is one of the things that bothers me. It's just like, I just feel like there should be more consistency between how something is prosecuted in like by the feds. Like if the feds are going to be complete jerks about it, they should like go and prosecute everyone who like ever gets caught with marijuana, like coming out of Colorado and everything. If they're not, like, I'm not saying that's what I want, but like if they don't want that law in the books, the law should go away. Like that is like, it shouldn't be about like the discretion of like individual officers or like whoever is in charge. That is the part that
I totally agree with you that consistency is the value that you lose with this type of experimentation.
Yeah.
Mike, you have a question.
Oh, wait, we were supposed to, that was the other person I was thinking of. Mike, I wanted to see if you wanted to be on the show this week or next week or the week after.
Well, that's a lot of choices. So I can definitely come on the show. We'll have to pick a particular day, but sometime next week or the week after or whatever, that's fine. The thing I wanted to underscore is that I thought Stephen Levy was, I said several things in chat because I was just commenting, making little notes to myself and to you. But Stephen Levy, I think, should definitely come on. His book on Facebook, I thought, was the the book I read this year that absolutely had to have been written and I had to read. And then I ended up having to do a lot of traveling across the country during the lockdown, and I would see these closed bookstores that had in the airports, right, that have Stephen's book in them, and I felt so bad for Stephen because this book is like really, really good. I mean, it opened my eyes.
3 years of reporting.
I know, right? It opened my eyes. You know, my instinct is always to just assume the best about the people in tech companies. It's just a reflex, right? Because I know too many of them, and I think a lot of them are trying to do good. But with Facebook, you know, where I've defended some things they've done here and there and criticized other things, I think you can see in Stephen's book, there's this progression of this layering on of detail where you really begin to understand the roots of not only the good decisions Facebook has made, and they've made some, but also, you know, bad ones. And it just seems to me that it's the touchstone book for people who want to talk about social media and talk about, you know, what the companies are doing wrong, what legislative or regulatory steps need to be taken. What do you do with an international company that, you know, in some ways is bigger than most of the governments that want to regulate it, and so on. So
Yeah.
so that's a big push for me.
Well, definitely
I love
let's definitely do Stephen Levy.
Sure.
And Mike, be in touch about when you want to come on, because we should stop meeting like this.
I know. Well, I just, you know, I just my job is to show up and say something interesting in your comments, and then hope you guys.
You
join.
always have interesting things to say. I love talking to you. So this is like, we have like a lot to discuss, and maybe like doing something with like you and Jonathan Zittrain, one first, and then the other would be.
And
really good.
and see which one calls the other a Nazi first.
Yeah, well, I think it won't be me, but I also, you know, I even come down on the Judd Apatow Whit Stillman question, because I think Whit Stillman's movies are great, but I think Judd Apatow would be a better guest. So,
well, I was very fond of Whit Stillman as a guest, and I Metropolitan and Barcelona and The Last Days of Disco are kind of they're really wonderful films. So thank you for showing up, Mike.
glad to be here. I'll get back.
Bye, Mike.
So Bob Rizzi, I don't think we've had you on live before, so welcome to In Lieu of Fun. You got to unmute yourself. Maybe that's not going to work. All right.
There is also, someone said about Kara Swisher. I talk to Kara pretty regularly. We could maybe get Kara on.
Happy to have Kara on anytime.
I kind of feel like she's very proprietary about her own promotion of her own podcast and like everything else, which is why I haven't invited her or thought about her, but like that would be great.
Well, happy to have her. She's quite interesting.
Yeah, no, she's great.
So anonymous attendee asks for In Lieu of Fun to have a judo expert on to discuss the history of Putin and my martial arts abilities, and maybe include a demonstration. So a couple things on this. First of all, we did this on Lawfare.
Yeah.
We actually had a martial arts, my Aikido instructor come on and assess Putin's chances against me. He was nicer to Putin's skills than I am, frankly. But you should look for that piece on Lawfare. It's a very straightforward and honest account of how Putin would fare against me. It's not biased at all, and you should check it out.
But like, I would love to do another better planned, not mystery guest thing with York or something that would be like fun to like do, with like you doing a demonstration like of your judo skills, or kind of like, I don't know if you're comfortable with that, or like, I don't know, doing something. It would be fun. I don't know.
I think we should have Yorick back on. I'm not sure. Like demonstrations without another person present are pretty hard.
Yeah. It's
like
true, but we should
if
have
Yorick and
back
I
on.
were in the same place, he could throw me around a little bit, and that
he
would be, and he would. And we could, like, he could show stuff, and I could take falls for him. But I don't, like, it's pretty hard to do without a sparring partner. But we should definitely bring Yorick back, because as far as I know, Trader Joe's still has not stepped up on this.
Trader Joe's. Oh, you mean Costco, the Kirkland
Costco,
brand.
sorry. Yeah, the trail mix.
Trader Joe's would be like the bougie version of like all Yorick wants is Costco Kirkland Signatures brand trail mix to sponsor him, because he eats like 80 pounds of it a week.
Well, but also like, he and Jonathan Rauch have this in common. Jonathan Rauch contends that the world's greatest chocolate is made by Costco. Which
this is kind of like people from upstate New York and Wegmans. Like we're complete nuts about Wegmans. Wait, you have Wegmans now and you don't love it?
one's opening up around the corner from me, and it will not fundamentally change my life.
The thing is like kind of Wegmans. When I was growing up, there was no such thing as Whole Foods. Like Whole Foods actually didn't exist as a brand, and it was Wegmans was that, but without the whole paycheck prices. And so that's why. And so it was like, and it was based in Rochester, but it was a tremendous grocery store. So
anonymous attendee here has another really interesting suggestion.
Might be a different anonymous attendee.
It may be. I just group all anonymous attendees as a single person. Do you know any interesting environmental lawyers? I feel like I've seen headlines about the administration getting rid of this and that and other environmental regulation, but don't really understand what they mean. So one of my very close friends in Washington for many years was an environmental lawyer and activist, but I'm afraid he passed away recently, Doug Kendall. But I do know others, and and the point is excellent. We have not had environmental attorneys or activists on to talk about what has been, I think, will be one of the more substantial policy-oriented shifts that this administration has made, although all of them are regulatory and can be undone if the administration were to, say, leave office in January. So yeah, let me think about that. And Kate, if you have good environmental, I mean, we could ask Richard Lazarus.
I have a ton of environmental lawyers that I know, but like I don't know what they're doing. Some are at the NRDC, some are at like various places, and like some of them can't comment on a lot of stuff. So.
Right.
But we can totally do that.
Yeah, it's a very good idea. So we should wrap up. We have so what is our various assignments for we know what we're doing Tuesday.
I think they're mostly for me. You have to ask Susan.
Take some of them.
You have to ask Susan. I think you're in charge of Susan.
I'll see if Susan can do Monday, which will buy us a little bit of time.
And then Tuesday is going to be Marty, and I'll chase down Ken and other people and see if we can get that together on Tuesday. And we don't have that. Tuesday is the only day that we have anyone booked or like that we have anything planned. So
yeah,
like,
it's okay. Let's see if we can do Monday with Susan. And what are you, do you have a mystery guest for tomorrow?
I do. You're going to be very mysteried.
I'm going to be mysteried. I'm excited about that. Can you give a hint
be
about the mystery guest?
This mystery guest. I've also like chasing them. They have to do the monologue.
Oh, wow. Can you give a
no hint.
No clues on the mystery guest? Is it somebody I know?
I don't know.
Wow. All right.
But it's, see, this is like part of like, As I'm John calls me a spoiler-ophile. Like I like look up the ending to every movie and to every book that I ever start. Like I can't wait. And so, but I am kind of a.
But you're a spoiler for yourself, not for me.
Yeah, but not for other people. But
I'm excited about it.
Yeah,
I like a good surprise.
It's a good surprise. It'll be a fun day.
All right. Until then, what do we say?
We don't have fun anymore. And so in lieu of fun, come hang out with us and be surprised tomorrow.